We are at the 11th CPM International Management Conference 2024. The strategic resurgence, the steering Sri Lanka's management landscape. So to start the session one, configuring and reshaping management practices and applications for Sri Lanka. So I would like to invite the resource panel to the stage now. Our session chairperson is Dr. Chani Imbugoda, Deputy Registrar, Administration, University of Visual and Performing Arts, and Senior Education Consultant, Bandaranaike Center for International Studies. And also our first speaker to discuss the topic on contemporary trends and actions applications for Sri Lanka, Mr. Dumindra Ratnayaka, the Chairman, 1990 Susaria Foundation. And our second speaker to discuss the topic on configuring innovative management practices for effective results, Mr. Manjula Varsapedwa, the Senior Manager, International Trade and Service Partnerships, Australian Trade Link Private Limited, Australia. And our panel, the first panelist, Mr. Krishna Ravindran, the Executive Director, Printcare PLC. And our second panelist, Ms. W.A. Dilrukshini, the Assistant Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Thank you. So there's a card on your table with a QR code. So if you can post your questions through that QR code to the session chairman for the panel for them to attend. So now, I would like to invite our first speaker for his presentation on the topic of contemporary trends and actions application for Sri Lanka, Mr. Dumindra Ratnayaka, the Chairman, 1990 Susaria Foundation.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to make a speech at this conference. I have a tough topic, so I thought that I will use my experience in 1990 Susaria and use that as an opportunity to explain some of the actions and the trends that we have taken, the decisions we have taken, and how we manage it. I will just give you a little briefing on what Susaria is all about before I go into discussing actions. I have 20 minutes and I sometimes struggle with time, but I see a timer there, so maybe I will not overshoot that time. So Susaria was set up in 2016 thanks to an Indian grant to set up ambulance service, pre-hospital care ambulance service, which means that we take people from an emergency location, home or on the road to hospital, and while we transport that patient, we also take care of him to sustain him and stabilize him. In 2016, we rolled out and we started our first phase with 88 ambulances in 2 provinces. The Indian government was happy with what we did. So we got the second phase to roll out all island in 2018. And also to regularize the whole operation and bring some sanity into it, we brought an act in Parliament. That act created a foundation, and the foundation is managed, it's a body corporate owned fully by the government and funded by the government. It specifically requires that we provide free service to the people because primary health care is free in this country. And so we are funded by the government, but we also have the right to raise funds through private and other means if necessary. And it is managed by a board that is appointed by the president. Today we have 1,115 staff manning 322 ambulances in 295 locations island-wide. So these people barely simply work in the ambulances, At any given time, it's 2 people in an ambulance, but we have shifts, so we have 1,115 staff. We have 72 staff in our call center. Total call center staff is 72, but we have a 25-seater call center, which is key to the whole operation. We have 30 admin staff supporting and running this whole operation in a centralized location. It has no distributed management, there's centralized management. So today we take about 5,300 calls every day. 98.9 or 99% of those calls are answered in the first ring. Because when somebody calls saying, I'm sick, or somebody is sick, you can't have him wait or her wait. You have to answer that call. Every call is answered. If a call drops, we call back. We handle about 1,050 plus cases every day. It's 5 times more calls because every case we have more than 1 call. And our average response time is about 11.5 minutes, island-wide. And we run approximately 25,000 kilometers every day. The total fleet runs about 25,000 kilometers every day. 322 locations. So to date, we are a 24/7 operation. We have 6.5 million. We have taken 6.5 million calls from the day one. We have hospitalized over 1.6 million people from 2016 onwards. So this is the operation. So when we launched and when we initiated the whole process, we wanted to be different. We wanted to ensure that we manage it in a manner that is not burden to the taxpayer. We wanted to make sure that we are efficient and that we deliver a service. So how did we go about doing that? And I was fortunate to be involved from the beginning, as to set up this company the way it operates today. So first thing we wanted a purpose-driven culture across the company. We wanted everything to be process-driven. And we wanted to automate, use technology as much as possible to manage these processes. The purpose was that we wanted an agility in the operation that we could face any situation. And I will talk about this going forward. So the culture, the first thing, board including, right? So that is the first thing we set about, a culture that takes responsibility to what you do, right? The focus was that, and the focus is that. And it comes from the board downwards, right? To achieve that, we had to ensure that we employ the people with right attitude. So we have a very strict culture that takes responsibility to what you do, right? The focus was that, and the focus is that. And it comes from the board downwards, right? To achieve that, we had to ensure that we employ the people with right attitude. So we have a very strict recruitment process. 3 interviews with the final interview done by a board member for everyone, starting from the driver onwards. A driver we call a pilot because he does have a huge responsibility. He's the one who takes the patient to the hospital, right? He also is trained medically to assist the medical technician who obviously is far better trained and more to take care of the patient. And then there is others in the office, the 30 admin staff, the call center. Everybody, we want to have the right people. We have a lot of challenges. We are a government organization, so we get a lot of calls from the politicians saying, hire this person, they send us lists, and then when we say that we are taking him through an interview process, they don't like it, but we don't change because we have a policy. We do not bend to politicians, right? We treat everyone equally. It's immaterial what your religion, what your race is, it's not considered. No one ambulance can have a Buddha statue or a statue of Jesus inside that, right? There's no religion inside the ambulance. The only religion is save the life, right? Nothing else. There is no religion inside the organization. We have religious ceremonies. For Vesak, we have a ceremony. For Christmas, we have a ceremony. For New Year, we have ceremonies. But that's different, right? We don't treat races. We have people from the north working in us. We have people from the east working with us. We have people in the south working. Everybody is treated equally. That's very important to ensure that you have a culture and you maintain that culture, because the culture of saving life has nothing to do with whether your race or religion is. We train people. We spend a lot of time and money to train people because training is very important. And we communicate. Our motto is communicate, communicate, communicate. Because everybody should know the challenges the organization faces and the issues, how to improve. So we communicate. Every week, the CEO almost talks with every employee, even if we have 1,115 employees, right? We treat them with respect, right? So all of this, right, is what has resulted and them accepting and falling into that culture. And also everyone across the organization, though this is a government organization, has KPIs, measurable KPIs. Their scores are calculated. Everybody can see their scores. Promotions are based on scores. Unfortunately, there are no increments being a government organization. Salary increments are not the thing like in the private sector, right? Increments are when the president decides or the finance minister says we are giving a 5,000 rupee increment to all government servants is when they get. So increments are not a function of KPIs, but their promotions are a function of KPI scores. And we wanted, as I said, to be different. So we devised processes for everything. And these processes, to keep up, we had to bring in technology. And that technology is what helps us to make sure that everything works like clockwork. And we run and we manage through exception. So the systems, the technology that monitors everything raises flags when there are exceptions. And since we only look at exceptions, we don't need a large number of people trying to manage situations. And exceptions are defined in the system so that flags are raised. So we use what is called the emergency dispatch management system as the core to the operation. So that's when a call comes, is used to dispatch an ambulance to the patient. The closest ambulance is dispatched, or the fastest ambulance is dispatched. Every ambulance is GPS enabled, so we know where it is at any given time. There's always a case ID. No ambulance can be moved without a case ID. If an ambulance moves without a case ID, that's an exception. An alarm is raised and a supervisor will call the ambulance and ask, why are you moving the ambulance? There is no case ID. Fueling is done. When the ambulance returns back to its base, it doesn't go separately for fueling. We use cards. We have credit cards. We have taken from banks that is used for the payment. Fueling is tracked in a manner that even if after fueling the system calculates the mileage of that ambulance and it has changed from the average mileage, it has had an exception, alarm is raised. So a supervisor will attend to it from the fleet system and see why is that, right? Was it pilferage or was it really a problem with the ambulance, right? So we have a lot of systems and processes, and that is supported by technology so that managing is easy. And this is why we can run 322 ambulance, 1,500 staff, 25,000 kilometers a day operation with 30 people. Right? And that's what we wanted to show. If you want to be efficient, you can be efficient, right? And be a lesser burden to the taxpayer, because taxpayer pays for this, right? We are also agile because of this. And I'll give you two examples. COVID management. I mean, I'm proud to say that Sri Lanka's COVID response was a success because of us. If not, hospitals would have crashed. And we saw that in India, where everybody went in three-wheelers to hospitals and hospitals couldn't manage it, right? So we came up with a system of triaging patients, right, with the support of the Sri Lanka Medical Association. We had to worry about internal infection control. We could not have anybody coming into the office and infecting the others, right? We had to ensure that our ambulance staff, if exposed, are, managed, right? We had to ensure in all that mess, the supply chain, think 25,000 kilometers a day, how many times do we have to change tires, right? How much medicine we need in the ambulances. We had to make sure that the supply chains were alive, right? And everybody came to do that. I mean, we were at everybody in our staff was working 18, 19 hours in that time, taking 9,000 calls in a system that was sort of taking 5,000 calls. I mean, we were all call center agents, right? But we still ensured that there was not a single patient refused, right? Because while we were handling COVID patients, people were getting heart attacks, right? People were getting sick. The only thing is the number of road accidents went down because of the curfew, right? But there was a few because during the curfew people also drove fast, right? And there were accidents, right? So the second one is the agility I want to explain is 2022. We had a crisis in this country and there were serious medicine shortages and there was no fuel. We all stayed in queues, right? But not a single day did we refuse a single patient, right? We still carried 1,000 patients to hospital. Actually, it went up because there was no fuel. So people who would even go on a car would call us, right? We were burning 3,000 liters of diesel every day, and we are burning 3,000 liters of diesel every day to run that 25,000 kilometers. We found the diesel, right? I mean, we begged, borrowed, and stole maybe, but we found the diesel, right? All because of that culture and the agility that the processes, the alarms, the exceptions that was coming in the system, right? And we didn't increase our staff to manage them. So all that, the culture, the processes, the technology we have brought in has helped us to be agile to face unexpected situations, right? We continue to introduce technology. And right now we have what is called the connected ambulance. We've launched a pilot phase where we have, through the telco partners, we have an ambulance connected with a call center where there is a doctor, and doctor can visible, everything that happens at the patient location is visible to the doctor, which makes the treatment better, right? And also the instruction flow better. We are integrating AI into our call center so that we can maybe employ differently abled people in our call center, make it an opportunity for them, and maybe my hope is one day we can totally automate our call center. We don't need people, right? Because if you, that's what AI can do today, so we're training AI, right? We have brought in learning management systems and training simulators. Taking care of a patient in a moving ambulance is very challenging. So we've created a training simulator where when we train, it's moving and shaking like as if it is in the road, Think in putting a cannula on a patient on a moving vehicle compared to a stationary bed. It's very different, right? We are bringing in an ePCR. Every patient for every case we have a patient control report that is generated, a copy is given to the hospital, and it has all the medicine that has been administered, the time, everything that has been done. So we want to track even the time taken, the distance traveled. We want to give a bill to the patient party. And the bill is not to charge them, but to make them understand the cost the taxpayer is spending to take care of that patient, right? And we will also at the bottom say, if you wish to make a donation, you can donate this way, right? And the PCR is how our stock management happens through every time medicine is done, the system gets updated, right? And then we also, there's exception control where in any ambulance, if the medicine is coming into expiry within 3 months, we move that to a fast moving location and stock so we try to prevent waste, right? Not to throw anything because it has expired, right? Then we also have now developed a bracelet. It's in beta testing. It's for fall detection. It's a low cost. I mean, this sort of functionality is there with Apple phones and Apple watches and all that, but this is a very low cost device so that if somebody falls, an older person falls, there's an alarm generated so that we can respond far before we get a telephone call. And also for motorcyclists, so that a motorcyclist meets with an accident, we will get an alarm with the location much faster before a call generates, because every minute counts in saving that life. So we are also bringing in technology. So I just want to end just saying, when I now spoke about technology, and everybody thinks these guys have spent billions, all it has cost us is 4 million rupees, right? So it's technology, very, very powerful, but very simple, right? You don't need a lot of money to infuse technology. You only need the will, right? That's the challenge. If you have the will to infuse technology, it doesn't cost you money. You can buy things for billions, but normally they don't work, right? We all know about it. So I'm running out of time also, so I just want to end. Yeah, the results are clear of what we have done. We have brought in culture. Culture is very, very important, and I believe strongly in that, right? Then we have processes, and the processes are supported through technology, and that has brought in agility. And as a result, we have been able to serve our people the best. We are actually having, if you look at measurables, we are better than global norms, right? Very few countries can claim 11.5 minutes average response time, right? And that's, including the first world countries. It's all because we can. And this is the message that I wanted to bring to you today, and I hope we can use that for a discussion further on, with a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ratnayaka, the chairman of 1990 Susari Foundation. So now I'm going to invite our second speaker to deliver his presentation under the topic of configuring innovative management practices for effective results. I invite Mr. Manjula Varsaperuma, the Senior Manager, International Trade and Service Partnerships, Australian Trade Link Private Limited, Australia.
Good morning. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity and having me here. I'm going to talk about innovation, innovative practices, etc. I think Mr. Ratnayaka just explained most of my presentation this morning. Okay. So as we stand here, looking at some of these mega structures, icons, typically we just acknowledge them with great gratitude, saying what amazing structures these are. But when was the last time we stood up and decided to think a little bit beyond that, to understand what made it possible, why these structures exist, what made it possible, what are the infrastructure, designing aspects, and mainly related to the topic today, leadership that provided or made this possible. And whether it's based on the countries, whether it's based on individual cities, we can just think of few reasons why they exist. But mainly, the innovation took us there. So we're going to talk about innovative practices as a practice. These are few innovative models, innovative engines. Innovation happens after the event. So what is innovation then? The process of establishing simply better ways of doing things. So as we go through a process, as we take employees through an innovative approach, better things happen. And that's, if you look at the innovation engine in the middle, Tina Seeling's engine, it talks about culture, attitude, and the smaller triangle. It has multiple triangles in it. The smaller triangle basically is the self. So self's attitude, knowledge, and imaginations, when you project to a group or a larger group of people in an organization, it goes to the culture. So for an example, attitude, multiple people having great attitude creates the culture. Knowledge, when you build a knowledge base in an organization and project it, it creates the resourcefulness or multiple resources. And collectively, it creates the environment or the habitat. Do you recognize these facilities? I'm selecting some of these because these are the places that I've been and contributed to innovation. So that one at the top is Innovation Center in China. And this is the Innovation Center, one of the innovation centers in Sydney and Singapore, etc. So again, why do these things exist? This is where the innovation engine is acted upon so that employees are taken through a journey. So Innovation Center in Hong Kong is responsible for innovating China's main products and services, and Innovation Center in Sydney is responsible for Industry 4.0 innovations, etc. So innovation labs, the purpose of innovation, it creates the culture, resources, environments. So the keynote, I think we picked up from Dr. Ratnayaka as well, is changing the attitude of people, creating a safe environment so that people can nourish. One of the key things that I learned in one of those innovation centers is creating an environment where failure is encouraged. It's quite interesting to figure out that when failures are encouraged within the innovation centers, we basically eliminate the fear of failure. And also, what happens is fail fast. Now, this is in the controlled environment, innovation center, within the innovation centers, but then when you fail fast, you can recover fast and then continue with the normal business. I have a business example from the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Commonwealth Bank became a private company back in 1996. Prior to that, it was a public sector organization, and then during that transition, they experienced higher staff turnovers and some other resistance in change. So the management then introduced innovative practices to facilitate change. I'll play a video from Mr. Ralph Norris. He was the ex-CEO of the Commonwealth Bank, and let's see what he has to say.
Well, I'm a technologist at heart. I mean, I started my career effectively in computing. I never expected to become Chief Executive Officer of a bank. Banking and finance is really the core of any economy. You know, it provides people with the opportunity to borrow, to buy cars, to buy houses, to have credit cards. It also provides them with the opportunity to deposit funds and save, and that's very critical to any economy. Technology really gave me a great understanding of the business as we went through the process of redesigning business processes and redesigning the way that we interacted with customers. And that's been due to the fact that we've been able to provide customers with instant access to services, whether it be through ATMs, whether it be through the internet, whether it be through telephone banking, transfer of funds internationally. So all of those things would not have been possible without technology. And I think that we're going to see a significantly greater use of the internet and innovation which will come from that. And we're seeing all of these smart telephones, iPhones and all the rest of it, which are getting all of these different sorts of financial applications. We've got stockbroking on the iPhone with ComSec. We've got a range of activities which I think are just going to continue to flow and be driven by innovative technology. So for the next 100 years, I think there's plenty of innovative space left for the banking industry. So graduates who are looking forward to innovative careers should be looking at applications or at various organisations or activities that have the high level of technological input into them, because I think those are the industries that are going to provide great career satisfaction and give people the opportunity to really get a feeling, a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction, because that's really important when you have a job. It's doing something that you really enjoy.
Cool. So at least 4 times during his speech, he indicated redesigning and innovation. So these are the key aspects of innovation. So design thinking, that is the human-based approach for problem solving. And that is the area that we were talking about earlier, where we create a safe environment for people to thrive and encouraging failure during the innovation process. Agile teams enable the cross-functional aspect of management, where agile teams can be deployed super fast, super efficiently, and then they can share responsibilities leading to high quality. Flexible work environments over the years has enabled to attract global talent. So Commonwealth Bank, for an example, they became the largest bank in Southern Hemisphere within few years, and that is through attracting global resources and being able to manage cross-functional aspects. So that's again part of that innovative culture they developed within few years. Innovation is also in service management. Now, Mr. Ratnayake also indicated in service management, the empathetic-based service management, the culture around customer satisfaction, etc. So, New South Wales government has aggregated multiple governmental departments into a one-stop shop where customers can get in and get multiple things done. For an example, as they walk in, they can work with the Department of Motor Vehicles, or they can work with Medicare requirements, taxations, etc. under one roof. So that service integration happens only through the technical integration, as Mr. Ratnayake said. That's a very important factor. Innovation has to look at all of the aspects of the ecosystem, and ecosystem management includes third-party logistics, etc., which means if you are just satisfying one customer, what is the ecosystem that supports it? How many suppliers are supplying to make that process easier? And how do we know whether those suppliers are on board for us to go in the journey that where we want to go 5 years down the line? Are their technologies, are their cultures coming along with us in order to provide that service? So those are the kind of things that we look at during service integration as best practices.
Locals are in the know, which is why Service New South Wales invests in local people, and we invest in local places. We've opened more than 90 service centres across regional New South Wales, with more on the way. Service New South Wales is about making it easier. Easier to get a birth certificate or working with children check. Easier to manage your registrations. We'll be there for the big moments. For the boaties on the coast. And we're making it easier for small business. Service New South Wales. We're coming to town.
That's again an innovative practice where we move towards the customers. Now, for an example, Australian government has invested on improving the serviceability by going near the innovation or going near to places where the innovation happens. There is another very quick video from Austrade. Austrade is a governmental agency where it helps, say for an example, Australian business wants to productize a particular idea. As they go through that process, the government takes them to the places where the innovation and the manufacturing will happen, and then they will also create the supply chain, the customer value chain, etc., to induce that change and support it. Here is a video, just explains what they do.
Trade is here for Australian business. We speak your language and the languages of your customers and investors. Around the world, Austrade helps Australian businesses succeed and promotes our goods and services. At home, we attract foreign investment to build the industries of the future and position our $143 billion visitor economy for growth. Go further, faster with Austrade. austrade.gov.au.
Yeah. I just want to show you those videos to indicate how the service management is shaping for the future. So they've gone through innovation processes, through those facilities we spoke about earlier, and then the enhanced mindset, enhanced culture, and enhanced technologies enabling all of that. Mainly the technology, towards the future, whether it's AI, whether it's combining multiple data sources. Now, one of the things from the past, or pain points from the past, is limitations in data. Data collected in the past for specific reasons, but they are not going to suit the future. And the innovation models are required so that we create every data source with a purpose for the future. And so those are the innovative mechanisms that we need to ensure in place to be successful in the future. Continuous improvement is such a massive thing in all of those sectors. I've been involved in a continuous improvement process project at a place where they already had achieved massive successes around manufacturing. So there was this automobile manufacturing plant, and the throughput of that manufacturing plant was 1 car per minute. And that vehicle goes on to the transportations 1 car per minute. And then how do you do process improvement? So they've already achieved massive amount of process efficiencies, but their mindset is every penny, every second has to be saved in order to be successful. And they've spent massive amount of serious money on process improvement just because if you don't change, competition will kill you. And that's the mindset that needs to be fostered so that we not only change organizations, we change as people as well. How do we change as people? Every day there are opportunities for us to develop personally. So personal development happens again after the event. So innovation always happens after the event. Why? Because innovation requires not just education, you need reflective knowledge. Reflective knowledge happens post-experience. So the process is basically understanding so when an event happens, understand the context of the event, which is normal practice. We understand what, when, how, where, why, but that's not enough. That's the first level of understanding, first level of learning. The second level goes on to understanding who are the customers, who are the other parties in it, and their feelings. Customer feeling is a massive thing nowadays in the innovation process to get that information and go through the transformation. Understand ways to do things better, understand ways to do other people's lives better, and also self-learning through that. So enhancing mindset, enhancing the cultures, technical-based changes we've spoken about. There are enough best practices that are available for technological growth. However, there is one caveat. A best practice at some place probably doesn't fit at another place. There's this really good analogy given to me by one of my professors. If you go to the dentist and ask for a denture, and if you just give a custom-made denture, it doesn't work. It's going to be a hard bite going forward. So the customization must happen even though there are best practices in place. So we spoke about multiple things, why things exist, what are the ideology behind it. As managers, what do we do? How do we facilitate innovation? The purpose-driven. So now, in the past, we had company purposes, company visions, missions, etc. Now it is all purpose-driven. So every business function must have a purpose, and purpose supported by a solid process that is also challenged every day for improvement, continuous improvement. We spoke about innovation models that are in place. One of my favorites for this presentation. Now, talking about innovation engines and processes is 1 or 2 day workshops. And we've just taken one example for run through these slides. But it is crucial that the smaller circle is self, and that's the center of all innovation, because as you project to the broader aspects, the totality, the organizations, the countries, world, etc., becomes more and more improved. Innovation centers are required because that is a place for us to create a safe place to thrive, and then test and test and test, fail fast and cheap first before going into the market, before being in the market for such a long time, and then getting through massive changes, which is difficult. We spoke about key aspects of changes, self changes, attitude changes, etc. that will support innovation. That photo is at the corner that shows blue-colored Dream Zone. It is actually called Dream Zone. It is from Hong Kong Town Gas, hundreds of year-old company, and they have established that Dream Zone for their employees it's a mandated thing, to come and dream about the future and do self-improvements, team improvements, and then suggest changes to the organization, which then get passed through that innovation engine to get higher outcomes. Spoke about the Commonwealth Bank's approach, where they started a transformation journey by becoming a public sector organization, transforming from a public sector to private sector, going through all of the difficulties, and then before becoming the largest bank, probably one of the largest in the planet, what they had done was the cultural change first. For a couple of years, they ran multiple workshops, multiple staff development approaches, and then only once their staff engagement levels were measured to 87% and above, went through the second phase of the transformation. That is a $500 million core banking platform that was implemented only after the cultural change was done. What it teaches us is that without that cultural change, they couldn't have become the largest bank in Southern Hemisphere. A lot of government agencies in Australia especially work with private sector organizations through integration to achieve greater integrations in services, not just the products and services, the entire supply chain, entire value chains, entire ecosystems are managed, must be managed through technology in order to provide the integrated services. A couple of take-homes. Best practices in an organizational change used by one country may not effectively be implemented in another without considering all of the other cultural and environmental factors. Innovation practices are required to change the discipline and engagement levels, as we've seen at Commonwealth Bank, prior to implementing major organizational change, whether it's a merger, whether it's a purchase, whether it's a sell-off, private equity companies splitting it, or venture capital companies purchasing it, doesn't matter. The innovation has to happen so that we are still in the competition for the future. Trade facilitation is a massive thing. Whether it's done by the private organizations or public organizations, the facilitation requires partnerships and integrations, as we spoke. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Varsap Peruma, the Senior Manager, International Trade and Service Partnerships, Australian Trade Link Private Limited, Australia. So now I would like to invite our session chairman, Dr. Chani Imbugoda, to commence the panel discussion. And also, your questions, you can post it through the QR code on the table.
Thank you. I think the two speakers need another round of applause for their insightful discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Domindra Ratnayaka and Mr. Manjula Varnapinva. And there is no universal definition on management. Couldn't say it is a jungle of warfare, where all the academics and the practitioners want to point out their own theories and practices as the best. So today, with the blessings of CPM, we all gather here to share the best practices of you and the other giants in the context of Sri Lanka, representing public sector and abroad, who have their roots in Sri Lanka but still striving in the world. So we had a very insightful speeches. Thank you so much. Although there is no universal definition on management, I think there is a universal concept. If there is a will, there is a way. It is not the private sector only that can do things better, but the public sector, because we have a living example here who enlightened us, giving his speech and showing his leadership. We talked about culture. We talked about employees. We talked about attitudes. We were talking and discussing about these things since last February as evaluators of the best practices of these companies. When we talk about culture and employees, when we talk about culture, basically we focus on the employees, but we forget the people, the board of management. With that note, I will turn to Mr. Krishnan. Taking the point of view of the innovation and invention, with your experience, can you enlighten us? What impedes innovation and invention in Sri Lanka from the organizational perspective?
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Before I came, I was thinking what we were going to talk about, and I thought, just before I answer the question, there are two things. One is going to be very obvious to everyone, and one is going to be less obvious. And the two things I had in mind was kind of data, and I thought that would be very obvious to everyone. And the second one was culture, which I thought would be a little less obvious. But then we just had 2 master classes on culture. But I think to answer your question, I think both of them touched on it perfectly. What stops us from innovating? Absolutely nothing. Just will and culture. As Mr. Ratnayaka said, 4 million rupees is quite a lot of output we got from that little amount of money. And it really comes down to the culture of the organization. the culture of the people, the processes, all of that stem from the leadership, from management. So I really think, there's really nothing stopping Sri Lanka from innovating. I think we've got the right leaders, unfortunately in the wrong places. But we've got the right leaders in corporate. We've got a lot of companies with the right culture, and I think it's just about setting that culture. Just a couple of things on invention. Invention, I think we have a small problem. We have a very small market in Sri Lanka, and the issue with invention is normally you need a lot of R&D and you need a big base to divide that by. And we've got a neighbor in the north that has 1 billion people. So we got tough competition there. But there's absolutely nothing stopping us from innovating, in my opinion.
Yeah, to add to that, Mr. Krishnan, I'm just intriguing too much on you, I think. There I have seen in corporates, the good ideas die before they even start crawling, just at the birth. From the corporate sector, this organizational sector, do you think our organizations enable innovation and invention?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I can speak about our organization. So normally when someone joins our company and they get the orientation, the initial impression they get is these guys are really bipolar. And the reason is, when we had COVID and all our plants had to stop and the employees came and said, look, what's our plan? Don't worry, we'll find a solution. When we didn't have diesel in the country and everyone came and said, what's the plan? Don't worry, we'll find a solution. When we had a shortage of dollars and we needed to get material, people came and asked, what would you do? What are we going to do? Don't worry, we'll find a solution. And I think that really comes from the culture. I think the reason I say bipolar is when they come with solutions for this. So for example, we're going to hire 30 buses and bus all our employees in. Then we start asking about ROI, right? What's the return? How much can we get out? And we become very data driven. And so the person will say, well, yesterday you said we'll find a solution. Now you're asking me about 1,000 questions with all my solutions. And I think that's really where innovation comes from. It's about looking constantly for solutions and then finding a cost-effective, intelligent way of executing that. For example, 4 million rupees of investment for 8,500 rupees per patient, 11 minutes response time, right? And I think it's the mixture of the two that really lead innovation. The right culture that's always looking for solutions, and then the rigor in analyzing all the options that you have and picking the most suitable option to do that. I think all of us are managers here, and if we give an unlimited budget, we can all solve pretty much any problem. I think the challenge is to solve the right problems with the right constraints or the constraints placed upon us. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I think data also has a big role in that. We were enlightened with that as well. In the morning, I will turn to Ms. Dilrukshi. What is your take on this from macro perspectives?
Yeah, I think you all are better managers, so I have nothing to, advise on this, how you manage your organizations. But I would like to say a few things. We went through the, worst ever crisis, economic crisis in this country. And it's, economy is in the recovery path right now. And we have got most of the macro indicators into a good shape. And you, as corporate sector, stakeholders, you must be feeling it right now. And then I would say, at the moment, I would like to basically highlight few things that the corporate sector can leverage on. Because you need to, that strategic resurgence is quite important for the country to reach its potential. So I would say when you look at our labor market is, it has some structural deficiencies. So you people can come up with some new thinking and use that deficiencies into your benefits. So when we see the labor market, our female labor force participation is quite low. So how corporates can get female into the workforce. That is something that you can think of that needs some innovative thinking, innovative work arrangements. So that is one aspect, because compared to labor force participation by female, being literate, I mean having degree level qualifications, that is quite low. That is something we need to address. And corporate sector coming up with some innovative work arrangement like a flexible working or working from home, or give them, like Scandinavian nations, you give them a break during the childbearing and caring period and absorb them again to the workforce, are some options to think of. Then I would say, when it comes to productivity, because a country like us having very low productivity, the corporate sector can make some interventions there, and you can benefit from that. Especially when it comes to agriculture sector, the productivity is very low. If you have heard the case of, Vietnam, being a rice importer, by doing reforms, they became the largest rice exporter in the country. So as they said, nothing is impossible. So this agriculture, I think the value chains, you need to link those with agro-processing. Then the third factor I would like to highlight, we are a small economy. So the economy can't grow beyond a certain level with this domestic demand. Then you have to think of, external demand, which is basically exports. But when come to exports, country like us, we need to tap into other supply chains, like, because some countries in the region are moving really fast. So that integration is very much important. And then the fourth point, I would say, basically European nations, their markets are open for corporates who are into ESG integration. So corporate sector, we as the central bank, we are facilitating this endeavor. So you need to think of how you integrate your business practices into ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspects. How you incorporate those into your working environments, and how because we are trying to promote sustainable finance in the country, how you can leverage on that exercise. So that will open up the European market specifically. Then I would say public-private sector, collaboration. This is one news I read in the FT today. It says Morato University Access Engineering collaborated research with Cambridge and Oxford, win prestigious innovation award. So that is the way to go for you to come up with strategic resurgence. Those are some thoughts from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, audience, I got only one question, so I will entertain that question. You can ask more questions, because this is a real good opportunity for you to clear your minds, go back and practice the best management practices and get the best award next year or after that. So the first question comes to Mr. Domindra Ratnayaka, Suvasaria. What are the challenges you faced, and how you overcame these challenges when you are implementing cultural changes in government organization?
I had the opportunity to start an organization afresh. So that was easy. But culture comes from the top. And if the top that is the board, doesn't believe in that culture, then it is not implemented. So at Suicide it was easy. I remember the first day I was having a staff meeting. The first day we launched, there were 600 staff, and we were all gathered in one location, and I asked them what their job was. And so people rose hand and said, I am a medical technician. Someone said, I am a driver. And I said, no. And then somebody said, I am the accountant. I said, no, that's not your job. And so everybody looked at me and what this stupid man is saying, right? And I said, your job is to save lives, right? So that was easy to sink that idea into the heads of the staff and then continue with that, and where every focus within the organization was to save lives. And this is why the focus of having average response time, which is good, the focus of answering every call and in the first ring, etc., etc. So I'll give you a little different experience. I was also sometime back the chairman of the BOI. And when I went to the BOI, I found the overall culture is that we are not investor friendly. I mean, the organization look at all the investors that had already invested in this country as enemies, right? And they try to control them and punish them and this and that. And I said, no, we are here to facilitate, right? We are here to help them. We are here to enable them and not to control and punish them, right? So it took, I was not there for long because I always say no to political interference, and then I had a fight with the president. So you can't stay in a location like that after you fight the president. So, but the fact is that it didn't take long for me to take that message down and change how they thought. I think what matters is that if it comes from the board downwards and to the top management and then down, people start looking at it differently. And then when people start looking at it differently, the culture is something that will always flow down. It's not a culture that will come bottom up. Something goes down, top down, right? The top must believe in it and the top must live it, right? So we didn't have a lot of challenges in rolling out that culture in 1990 because we started afresh. But I experienced it, changing culture in organization that had been there for a long time and was thinking differently, and it was possible. But I didn't stay long enough to really build that culture into that organization, but that is unfortunate. So I think it's very easy. It's that we ask. Every time I interview a CFO, when I interview, I ask, what's your job? And anybody who tells me my job is to keep accounts right, I won't hire. But anybody who tells me my job is to ensure sales is supported, I hire. That's the way we should look. An organization is successful if there is revenue, right? What are we doing in that organization? In a normal business organization, we try to make an income. Everybody must support that. That should be the culture, right? Support the sales guys. But usually we look down at the sales guys, right? They are uneducated, they have not passed exams, they hardly pass the A-levels. So, we are managers, we've done degrees, we have gone to IPM and we've done this, MBA. No, it's the other way around, right? So I think the culture must come top down and must believe in supporting the organization. So based on the organization and what the organization does, whether it's a business, it's a government. In government, it is always a challenge, but we see that, right? When we go into a government office, we are looked at as if we are nasties, they don't want to support it, because the top culture has never been that, right? It is a challenge, it's not easy to change, but if the top believes it, I think it can be changed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dharmendra. Yes, in this forum, we look from top to bottom and bottom to top, and the external environmental factors as well. With that take, he was sharing some experience at BOI. Being in the trade facilitation for quite a long time, more than 2 decades, Mr. Manjula, what is your take on that? Taking back from Australian experience as well.
Cool. I think I can give an example where I was working for an insurance company once, and they had an aged care facility, and that is for aged care as it comes. So their motto was very simply, this particular motto was created so that the culture understands the point that we made earlier, the service orientation, the empathy, and things like that. And they came up with a motto to say, we are facilitating death. That's it. And then when we heard that, everyone went quiet. Because how do you do that? What kind of empathetic culture we need to build in order to facilitate that? So it's really important to look at the purpose as opposed to that vision and the mission and things that only generates profit. It is also the people. Strategy in MBAs, we talk about finances first, then the customers, then the internal processes and the teams and the people, training, etc. But that cultural aspect differentiates you from the rest because it builds the it supports not just an individual, not just an organization, it is also the entirety of the society. So I think from that perspective, that's why I was more trying to emphasize on the innovation as a process where people feel super comfortable failing. And that would then generate not competition, but innovation at a rate. So that's my take. And then perhaps if we flip the tables around and figure out what are the innovation killers, and killers are basically the toxic environment where, say for an example, an employee comes up with an idea, bright idea, and then management goes, no, we don't have time, effort, blah, blah, blah. That is a killer. Or the other side of the story, they pick up that idea and sell it as their own ideas. That would be the last time that employee would come to you with a bright idea. So there are multiple killers that we can internalize our own experiences if we turn our eyes internally to figure out what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong. As managers, if I just ask the question, everyone has a manager, right? We all have managers, even the top level. So if we go and think of think reflectively and ask ourselves, what improvements can my managers do to make my life easier? I'm sure all of us can come up with 10 or 50 items. I could think of 10 easily. My managers aren't here, so I can, go on about it. So every workshop I do, doesn't matter what the culture is. If I ask that question, any manager would come up with 5 different answers their managers could do to improve their lives. So to turn our eyes internally, that way we can improve ourselves, even though our subordinates won't tell us they are there. Those improvement opportunities are there straight away. So that's where the self-reflection comes into play, because reflection happens after the event, where you think of the experiences of it and the experiences of the other people. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. Mr. Krishnan, there are so many questions now coming. Most of them are talking about culture and employee engagement. Yes, there is a challenge that with the new generation we are facing certain challenges. Maybe half of the population here also new generation. What can you say about employee engagement in organization? And it is getting weaker day by day.
is the question. It's quite funny because when you talk about brain drain, which is a topic now because a lot of young people leaving, and I actually have a slightly different take on this as well. I think there's a brain drain at the top. There's a whole generation of people like my father and his contemporaries that came through a very difficult time in Sri Lanka, right? The 70s, 80s. I was a kid that was in school, probably heard about it, but didn't really go through it. And they were real fighters. And they are also the guys who actually, even in our organization, I don't know about the others, but in our organization, were the anchors for the culture. And so, for me, there's actually brain drain on both sides because I see a lot of these people retiring now. And, they are old school in inverted commas, but they also came through a time when you fought, and the will was there, and the ambition was there, and the fight was there. So, coming back to employee engagement, I think there's a lot that these people taught us. Identify a purpose, communicate that purpose in a way that everyone understands. When you come into work with a purpose, salary is important. Obviously, we all need to live, but I think purpose is more important. If you come in, if you can communicate that purpose correctly to your team, and they buy in and they believe in that purpose, they're a lot easier to retain and a lot easier to engage. I think disengagement happens primarily because you're not on board with what is happening in the company, you don't understand what they're doing, you don't feel a part of what they're doing, and I think that starts. I mean, I think it's about 2-hour lecture that probably people more qualified than me can give, but I really think it's coming back to the right purpose, and I think both our speakers touched on that. You get the purpose right, the rest of it becomes easier, and of course there are lots of ways to engage people, but I think clearly communicating that is the first step, and then of course celebrating things that they do. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we can talk about. I don't know if I answered the question though.
Yes, I think the audience agree with that as well. Turning to Ms. Dirukshi, now we are in the last 18 minutes of this session. I think Mr. Manjula talked about this flexible work arrangements, and when I was listening to your waves, you were talking about flexible working arrangements in a way, engaging more female employees to the system. Now, we are talking about the cultural development, and I'm sure now these plantation industries here, so many companies are facing. I mentioned about the new generation where they prefer to work kind of freely, not in those frames. What do you think about it and your views on that?
Yeah, I would say because, some innovative strategies are required especially with this, labor migration and the population shrinking. The companies will face the labor shortage, and it will be a pressing issue if this trend continues. So, you have to come up with innovative strategies, working from home. Though we have got back to our usual routine, most of the Western countries are still on working from home arrangements, plus flexible working hours, and some, especially to get the women attracted to the workforce, some long maternity leave kind of arrangements, if private sector can cater, are important. So it's up to the managers to think of what kind of innovative arrangements they can come up with. But I would say it will be a pressing issue during next 2-3 years if this trend continues. And I would like to add what the other two speakers said, because it's finally the shared vision. He said, because, saving a life is our motto. So my boss said, we have to come out of this. So that was the shared vision for us. So we have come out to a certain extent.
Thank you. Yes, we have to come out of this, not individually, but as a team, as a nation. We have to come out of this. We have to forget about the generation gaps and cultural varieties, but speak one thing. If you really want to be efficient, you can be efficient. Thanks, Mr. Daminder, for giving that extremely important management concept. Yes, if you really want to be efficient, you have to be efficient. So we were talking about, when looking at these two speeches, one thing is the agility. We have to work in turbulent times. Management is not an easy task. Managers have to sail on a tough and rough sea. There are turbulent times. Not only the organization itself shakes, but the entire world shakes like COVID pandemic. So that's why we are here, to have this kind of discourses, to share the best practices and learn from the failures and successful stories. Talking about the failures, Mr. Manjula was always promoting failures, the first attempt in learning. Can you say something about it very briefly?
Yeah. So that failure was, I guess, the context was when you set up innovation labs in organizations, that is actually the safe environment. That is actually to test first, fail fast, fail cheap. We've learned this in management for a long time. But the way to do that is by creating that safe environment, because no one wants to fail. Right? We are not promoting failure in the organizational level, but failure of a person is seen as a failure of the system that has been put in place. So what are the processes that allowed for the failure to happen? Is it lack of training? Is it lack of facilities? Is it lack of etc., etc.? So it is then understood, when you look at it that way, oh, the failures are actually can be improved, and let's do that as part of the innovation process. So once you go through that innovation process, you understand the failing points, failover points, business continuity planning comes out of innovation. Disaster recovery problems come out of innovation. So all of that comes out of the innovation as a process. When you test with the attitude that before going into the real world, before you productize it and implement it, testing in the innovation space. So that's what failing first means. And the other side of the thing in the culture as well, if in an organization where failure is punished over and over again, that's a killer of innovation, because people won't try new things and come up with new ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And there's another question which I'm compelled to turn to Mr. Domindra Ratnayaka. What kind of methods we can use to make a cultural change of organization where over 7,500 employees are spread across the country?
Okay, so as I said, first the top must believe in that culture, right? And that culture should be a culture that benefits the employee also, right? So it all depends. It's very difficult to say A, B, or C, but it's communication, right? Because communication of that culture, the culture that you want to establish in that organization, and if it's like 7,500 employees distributed over the country, communication is challenging, because you sometimes find it difficult to reach everyone. So you have to think of that, the communication part of it, to show the benefit that they will get because of adhering to the culture, right? In my case with Suasaria, it was quite easy because it was about saving lives, right? And when they started saving lives, and when the medical technicians and the pilots, the drivers, they started saving lives, the emotional value that came, I mean, the emotional feelings that they saw, right? One girl told me that, she was on the first day of her job, and she had to go to rescue a person who had fallen off the train, and the train had gone over his legs. So when she went there, the legs were severed, right? So she had to make sure that the bleeding stops, and then she took the patient to the hospital and handed over to the hospital. The patient held her hand and said, "Well, Buddhu vendona," because of that was the emotion. So once she heard that, there was no need to teach her the culture that, we save lives. So that was easy, right? So all those, the staff, especially the staff at the ground level, they experienced this way or the other, right? It was easy. So there has to be that experience of that culture. Why, right? I mean, if you say a culture where, as you said, there has to be flexible working hours, right? And if you want to give flexible working hours to people, then we need to enforce a culture of responsibility, right? I mean, just take an example. There is a person, a clerk, who writes checks in the office. How do you create a culture of responsibility and give her the freedom to have flexible hours? And I would say her responsibility is not to write checks perfectly, but her responsibility is to make sure every vendor is paid on time, right? And if you say your responsibility is to ensure every vendor is paid on time, whether you write the check at midnight or whether at 2 o'clock in the morning or 9 a.m. in the morning, it's immaterial, right? Because the vendor gets paid on time. And then it moves from writing checks correctly to a different then objective. And then so that's a culture of responsibility, right? And when people embrace a culture of responsibility, it's very easy to give them flexible working hours, because then you don't need to look at what time they come and what time they go. They deliver their responsibility, right? So likewise, so you need to look at the culture you want the organization to embrace, right? The top must believe in it. You must communicate it, and you have to also facilitate it by bringing in that needs that. So it's very difficult to in generalize say it, but that's how you have to go about.
Thank you, Mr. Dominder. Yes, we are in the last 8 minutes. Being efficient, we have to walk the talk. That's why we are here. So in 7 minutes, we have to wrap up this session. I will turn to Mr. Krishnan with one question as well. Internal politics are there in organizations. As I said, management is a tough job, but very responsible and accountable job. So when some employees are spoiling the minds of the others, how would you build that culture and retain it? With that, you can give your remarks as well, ending remarks as well.
Yikes. Internal politics. I don't, usually I spend more time on external politics, but I think, for me, politics usually resides when objectives and responsibilities are not clear. And when there is no when there is a lack of transparency. I think the key, even with us, if you look at our company, just to give an example, how much petrol I pump in my car under my company account, everyone can see, the whole management can see, from managing director down to the junior managers. And so that's maybe a bit of a radical way of looking at it, but we try to be as transparent as possible, and that's the way we try to tackle internal politics. If I know, we draw the line at salaries, we don't go that transparent, although I know some companies that even make that transparent. But I think if things are transparent, then there is no space for politics, right? Because you know what he said and I know what he said. A lot of our meeting minutes are publicly available, so you know what everyone said in the meeting. no one needs to find out from someone else what happened at a meeting or at a discussion. So for me, what we practice, and we seem to be relatively, I don't think you can wipe out internal politics. We're human beings, and human beings always like to play politics. But transparency for me is the number one way to wipe that out. If I know what you said and you know what I said, then there's really no space. And if the decisions taken for promotions are publicly discussed, so we have a forum where that can be questioned. Why did so-and-so get promoted and why did so-and-so did not? Both the head of HR and the managing director both will answer that question. So when there is transparency, generally, we find that there is very little room for politics because everyone knows what actually happened, what the rationale was. You may or may not agree with that. That's a different matter. But everyone knows what the rationale was. So I would say that would be my answer to that question. As far as takeaway is concerned, I think we've all been reading about AI and generative AI. I think the data revolution, the AI revolution actually has been happening for a long time. ChatGPT just took the news last year. But I think the power of information and data is still vastly underutilized by managers. And something that we are trying to do is really go into detail about data on customers, data on production operations. And it's not because we're trying to maximize every single minute of output or as a lot of companies do, and we do too. We have to look at costs, unfortunately, because we export a lot. But it's really about trying to find insights that other people have not found yet. And a lot of the times, a lot of the innovations, which was the first question that was asked, comes from a unique insight that you have that no one else does. Right? And initially people think you're crazy because you're trying to do something that no one else is doing, but then eventually they realize, wait, this guy's onto something. And that's really how our business grew. If you go back to our history, we figured out that you can use a certain printing technology to do something when everyone else was doing something else. And I really think that mining data for these insights is a huge competitive advantage that we can do out of Sri Lanka because we've got extremely talented resources and there's no tax on data at the moment. So we can try, at least for now. They haven't found a way to tax that. So we can really use that.
Thank you, Mr. Krishnan. There are some more questions coming from the audience. Thank you. Very active audience we have. But you can always socialize with our panelists and the speakers during the breaks and clear your doubts. So I will turn to Ms. Dilrukshi. In 1 minute, can you give a take-home message? Yeah.
I share the same ideas that he shared, because you have to be informed, think ahead the curve, and leverage on the opportunities.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dhamendra, your take-home message?
Take-home message is focus on culture, hire people with the right attitude, and don't overstaff, right? It is very important that whether it's a private or a government organization, because when you overstaff, there's insecurities, and when there's insecurities, there's politics, right? And people don't work. So don't overstaff. So culture, process, technology, those are the key things, and also make sure that you are, you don't overstaff, right? And you hire the right people. The right people are the people with the right attitude, not with the right skill. You can always give skill, you can always train people, but you can't change attitude. So that's very important.
Thank you. Mr. Manjula?
Yeah, thank you. Change is the only constant thing. People have been saying that for such a long time. But then how do you change? Change happens through education. So the innovation is actually promoted through education institutes around the world, where institutions build innovation labs and then go through that process. So from organizational perspective, I think it's important to recognize that the culture is not just that organization's culture that matters, it is also the advocacy of it. Because when you operate as an organization, you will never operate as a single entity. There will be multiple suppliers, multiple business partners, and the entire ecosystem represents your brand, represents your culture. So that's where the service management is important, so that you can establish what the culture you need, the cultural values, and how to implement it, the KPIs around it, not just for the internal staff, also to all the business partners, so that the collective message is the same. So that's probably something I would advocate.
Thank you so much. In the morning, our chief guest, Mr. Katsuki Kotaro, said, he always thinks what is the ideal situation and work towards it. We are a nation who prefers to give excuses. So we do SWOTs, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we say goodbye to our innovative and inventive ideas most of the time, although it may be the ideal situation. We have examples here who took the challenge and created a culture and proved if there is a will, there is a way. Thank you so much. Enjoy your rest of the day. Thank you very much.
So with that, we conclude our second session. So I'd really like to thank Dr. Chani Imbugoda, our session chairman, and also Mr. Domindra Ratnayaka, our speaker, and also Mr. Manjula Varsa Peruma, our speaker. She came all the way from Australia. So you are a proud Sri Lankan, so sharing your international exposure. So thank you, Mr. Varsa Peruma, and also Mr. Krishna Ravindran, our panelists, and also Mr. W.A. Dirukshini, our panelists. So thank you very much. And now to hand over the token of appreciation, I'd like to invite Professor Lakshmana Vatavala and Dr. Samantha Ratnayaka and Mrs. Gayani Punchiheva, the Governing Council members, and Mr. Dilshan Arsakur Ratna to hand over the token of appreciation for our session chairman, our speakers, and our panelists. Yes. Our session chairman, Dr. Chani Imbugoda. Dr. Chani Imbugoda, our session chairman, receiving the token of appreciation from Professor Lakshmana Vatavala, and Mr. Domindra Ratnayaka, our speaker. Receiving the token of appreciation from Professor Lakshmana Vatavala. And Mr. Manjula Varsa Peruma, our speaker of the session 2, receiving the token of appreciation from Professor Vatavala. And our panelists, Mr. Krishna Ravindran, receiving the token of appreciation from Professor Vatavala. And Miss W.A. Dirukshini, our panelist, receiving the token of appreciation from Professor Vatavala. Thank you, and I invite you all for a group photograph. Thank you. So with that, we conclude our second session.